Good afternoon, and thank you for joining our webinar on March Madness, Social Media ROI for College Admissions, specific to search, brand research, and customer service. My name is James Beinberg. I am the Director of Research at TWG+, and I also do quite a bit of work in general online marketing and particularly in social media consulting. So we appreciate you being here. This title slide that you're seeing discusses parts of an infographic that relates to a study that we just recently released, which we will be covering the major findings of during this presentation. And basically what we did is we analyzed about 120,000 conversations taking place on social media channels and other online channels related to 16 national universities that are highly ranked by the U.S. News and World Report in their annual rankings. And the reason that we did this was for many reasons. One, we want to build an understanding of how prospective students and other key audience members of higher education institutions are feeling about the industry writ large, how they're feeling about specific institutions, their perceptions of many of the drivers of the college choice process that have been identified in the literature, such as tuition and fees, strength of programs and majors, campus safety, and many others. So we're going to dive right in here. And when people think of social media, very often the initial emphasis is on outbound communication. And clearly, what we say online and via social media is extremely important, and we don't want to minimize that importance. However, it's not necessarily always the best starting point. Many of the metrics associated with social media in particular, while they might feel good and be kind of nice and speak to levels of engagement and popularity in certain ways, aren't often tied to our real marketing goals. And what I mean by that is, let's suppose that your Facebook page has 1 million likes or fans, or that a lot of your tweets are getting retweeted and a lot of your content is getting shared. That's all well and good, and we might expect some degree of correlation between that popularity and your marketing goals, but it's not a guarantee. So, 1 million people liking your Facebook page doesn't necessarily mean that one new student has enrolled at your school, or that that's driving applications. So a lot of the metrics associated with these channels, again, while important and sort of fun and nice, aren't always in line with our goals. And there are other ways that we can start to assess how social media can be a very measurable, impactful part of our overall marketing strategy, particularly on the recruitment side. So we at TWG+ like to approach social media first from the listening perspective. We feel that by understanding what people are saying about our brands and obviously our schools, that once we get a better understanding of that, we can craft more effective communication strategies, not only from a recruiting perspective, but we also have access to a tremendous amount of data that can constantly inform our understanding of how our brands are perceived qualitatively. We can identify potential customer service issues because we're gaining access to data that is delivered in real time. So again, we want to make sure that just like any good communicator, we listen first and then speak. And this third quotation on this slide from a business perspective really says a lot. We listened to what our customers wanted and acted on what they said. Good things happen when you pay attention. I think that quote is, really says it all for how we can use social media more effectively as higher education marketers. So, there's all this conversation taking place on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Instagram and, all across the online space, going on all the time as we speak. And these communications, are very important to, one, first of all, find, and two, to understand, because how our institutions are perceived, how we rate against our competing institutions, understanding what matters to current and prospective students. There's a lot of data that can be gleaned by first, identifying, and then second, in analyzing this conversation that again is taking place, 24/7. once we get a better understanding of what's being said, we can send out better marketing messages. Our recruitment and engagement strategies can be optimized. We can learn a lot about, again, how our brands are perceived to therefore impact our own branding efforts. And in many cases, we can identify day-to-day customer service issues. So in terms of social media research in higher education, there have been a lot of studies done that focus on how prospective students utilize social media in the college choice process, as well as on how admissions staff members utilize social media for admissions and overall marketing. But that's really more in sort of a percentage of channel breakdown type of study. So for example, a lot of studies will show that that prospective students utilize social media 15% of the time when they're looking at colleges or whatever. And that's important, but no prior study had really analyzed the specific content of what was being said and shared thematically. And furthermore, we felt that nobody had really taken this data and presented clear strategies regarding how admissions and marketing people in higher education can utilize the data. So that was really a large part of our goal, was to set forth some very clear, easily implementable strategies. And we're going to talk more about that as this presentation goes on. So in terms of our methodology, we collected data on the 16 schools that I will show you in just a moment from March 1st to April 15th. And we chose that time for two reasons. One, the March Madness basketball tournament was occurring, so we expected to see a lot of school spirit and kids kind of getting on each other about their schools beating another school, and so we figured we'd see a lot of just kind of good collegiate enthusiasm. And of course, during this time, it's also the height of the college admission season, so we anticipated that we would find a lot of people talking about the college choice process, where they're going, where they're getting accepted and denied, and then also see a lot of the variables associated with those decisions, such as price and other things. So we used the U.S. News and World Report rankings and selected some different institutions that are scattered throughout the country geographically, but they're all very highly ranked. What we did was we utilized a social media monitoring software solution, which sounds very draconian and kind of Orwellian in some ways, but really just think of it as more or less a Google search that is geared specifically to finding communications that are happening in the social media space. So using the same types of search queries that one might enter into Google, we can enter those types of queries into this software and find conversations that are taking place on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all those different kinds of channels. So what we did was we tracked the names of the schools, their main institutional Twitter handles, and their athletic mascot names. Once we created those search queries, we collected data from March 1st to April 15th, and then we analyzed it along several lines. One, we were curious about what was the channel mix being used to discuss these institutions. This is really important for schools to understand, where are people talking about them? Are people really active on, or are prospective students really active on Facebook, Twitter, on forums, in blogs? Another thing that we wanted to understand better was what was the general sentiment of these conversations and communications. The software package that we use has an automatic sentiment analysis feature that classifies all conversations as positive, negative, or neutral. And let me just be the first to say that sentiment analysis is a very young, burgeoning science, and it has many critics, and it certainly has some accuracy issues. However, at a very high level, it's informative, particularly good at identifying negative conversations. So as a higher education marketer, when I see a report that has negativity associated with certain channels, my first thought is I need to go to those specific conversations and look to find out if I have a customer service issue, if they served bad fish at the alumni dinner last night, whatever's going on there, we want to understand that. Another thing that's important for schools to understand is who is communicating about them, and are they fans or are they critics? So we can figure out who's tweeting the most about particular schools. Are they people who work for the schools? Are they marketing people? Are they current students? Are they prospective students? One highly underutilized resource from a marketing perspective at colleges and universities is leveraging people who are fans on social media who, inherently, due to the nature of the communication channels, have a network of other people. So as you can imagine, when you identify people who are willing to say really good things about your school, if you can kind of get them involved a little bit more formally in your outreach and communication, you have access to quite an additional workforce that can really expand your resources. Once we took the entire body of conversation, again, which was about 120,000 unique communications, we used some text analytics software to look at word frequency, to find the topics and themes that were coming up quite a bit in conversation. We also wanted to analyze clusters of words, phrases, to again sort of dive in a little bit deeper at a thematic level and topical level of what people were talking about. And then we also specifically focused on themes that have been identified as important to prospective students. So again, looking at things like mentions of tuition and fees, and academic strength, program availability, strength of professors. We sought specifically to analyze those drivers of the college choice process. And here are the schools. Again, a lot of very familiar names, I'm sure, to all of us. Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Columbia, Michigan, University of Chicago, Stanford, Rice. You can see the list here, so I won't insult you by reading to you. But a very impressive list of schools. They're clearly highly ranked for a reason. And we did, in this study, gather data from all different types of institutions. So this particular presentation and this first report is based on these national universities, but we also collected data on regional universities as well as national liberal arts colleges, regional liberal arts colleges, historically black colleges and universities. And we're going to be releasing reports on all of those institutional categories in the future, but we started here. And that was largely because March Madness, of course, has these larger Division I schools more in the mix. So again, we had about 120,000 unique communications, and here is the breakdown of those communications by channel. Now, Twitter here is clearly dominating from a channel mix. That is largely due to the fact that we were tracking the main Twitter handles of these schools. So that is not a surprise. However, there are other things about Twitter that make it a little bit more easily found. Twitter is a very public source of data. From a privacy standpoint, almost all the information is public, which therefore makes its data easily found. Facebook has much more strict, complex privacy settings, so only certain types of posts which are delegated as publicly searchable can be found on Facebook. So we anticipate, where you see roughly 4,500 conversations, we can safely assume that there was probably a lot more communication about these schools going on Facebook that we just frankly couldn't find due to the limitations of how Facebook provides data. We're going to take a look now at some of these specific channels. Twitter, again, out of the 120,000 conversations, about 86,000 were collected from Twitter. Again, it's an easy source to monitor because it's very public in nature. Here we see different types of tweets that are all across the board. That first one there, talking about the Kentucky Wildcats is clearly in the March Madness sphere. But then we have discussions of scientific breakthroughs at Stanford, a prospect, triumphantly declaring that he or she was accepted at Northwestern, and somebody at Caltech discussing a professor's move from Caltech to a different institution for a variety of reasons. Facebook, again, it's a little bit tricky to monitor Facebook due to its privacy settings, but we still got quite a bit of rich data from there as well. That top post, again, is related to the NCAA basketball tournament. That second post there, where somebody is being congratulated, Katie, on her acceptances at a variety of schools, we see there University of Illinois, Pepperdine, University of Richmond, Marquette, University of Michigan, and some other schools. Now, what's interesting about that is, we all have our preconceived notions of who our competitors are. And, for some it's fairly obvious. At Harvard you have Yale and Princeton and other Ivy Leagues, and those are, there's some no-brainers. But when I look at this list, it's not very intuitive. I think, why am I seeing Illinois, Pepperdine, Richmond, Marquette? What I would want to know is, what are the common threads there? Are there program commonalities where maybe Katie is interested in specific programs where these particular schools are really strong in them? Maybe she just wanted to apply to a diverse range of schools. But when we see data like this over time, it very well might challenge our preconceived notions of who really are our competitors. One thing that we saw quite a bit there in that next post was somebody wishing there were more stoners at their school. For those of you who have not seen the Facebook confessions pages, this is a huge new trend that's springing up at campuses nationwide, and in many cases extremely problematic. Basically, these confessions pages are started by anonymous students at schools where other students anonymously discuss activities that are highly sexual and talk about illicit drug use and all kinds of things that are potentially very brand damaging, as well as often illegal and in many cases, hazing and bullying other students. I work with a number of schools working on social media related consulting who have had these confessions pages, who didn't even know that they had them before we found them using the software, and had some legal proceedings and pretty ugly administrative tasks in order to get them under control. So for all of you out there listening, I would, if you are not aware of whether or not your school has confessions pages, I would definitely go on Facebook and put in your school name and confessions and hope that nothing comes up. But then we also have responsible replies to things like that. So that post down below, Johns Hopkins, was putting out a toll-free hotline for hazing. So there are definitely some responses in the mix as well. Images and video. In order to be found by the social media monitoring software, the metadata of a picture or video has to include the terms that we were searching for. So, for instance, University of Michigan was part of the description of the YouTube video that popped up, whereas Emory University was part of the Instagram image in the lower right that popped up. So, images and video have to be labeled with text-based data in order to be found, but those sources can be found equally effectively. Forums, a very, very understudied and often overlooked channel in the college choice process. We found there are some forums that are specific to prospective students. I would almost refer to them as kind of online support groups for high school kids who are in the application process, where we found all kinds of rich discussions about kids who are anxious about receiving hopeful acceptance letters, talking about being waitlisted, all kinds of other issues associated with the, college choice process and the whole admissions process. So some really good websites out there and a lot of good data to be found. News and blog sources. So in addition to searching Facebook and Twitter and blogs and forums, this software also combs online newspapers and other web-based sources. So here, we see discussions related to the rise of massive online open courses and the role that different schools are playing, such as Stanford. In that post below, we see a professor from Rice University who is doing some economic analysis of predictions for the next 25 years, in which he advises that people who are driving anything related to cars will probably not have the best employment prospects. Social bookmarking sites like Reddit are also picked up. That is, the social bookmarking sites are often neglected in the study of higher education communication as well. But here we see some very interesting posts related to financial aid, people looking for a college search project. Google Plus. A lot of people were under the impression that Google Plus was only used by Google employees. In fact, that is becoming less and less the case, and Google Plus is growing quite a bit in popularity, and because it's a Google product and Google is the giant in online search, it is a channel that should not be overlooked in your mix if in fact it has. And this particular study that was found at Duke University, again one of our focal institutions, found that women wake up grumpier than men. Who knew? Sentiment analysis. Again, we touched on this a little bit earlier. The accuracy of sentiment analysis is in question, and particularly as it is part of different software packages. But at a high level, when I would see a report like this, I would feel pretty good about the fact that there is a lot more neutrality and positive conversation going on than negative. But I would definitely, if I was an individual school, go look at every conversation that was marked as negative and determine why, and also think about whether there's something that needs to be done from a customer service perspective. Looking at the people who were the most frequent tweeters about these schools, this is a little bit interesting because when we combined all 16 schools, some of the most frequent tweeters were actually organizations, like community organizations such as Berkeley Buzz, or actual private sector companies like EduMojo. At the individual school level, much more typically we see marketing personnel, individual faculty, the athletics Twitter handle, but then we also see a lot of current students who are active as well. So this list of the most frequent tweeters at the aggregate level was not really as representative as what somebody would see at the single institution level. But very important to understand, who's talking about us the most, what are they saying, and why. Taking all 120,000 conversations, we dumped it into text analysis software to get a better understanding of what specific words and phrases were coming up the most. This word cloud that you're looking at, the larger the font, the higher the frequency with which that term was mentioned. And what we did was we extracted the institutional names and words like college and university out because they just dominated the conversation. And what you would see if I didn't do that in this word cloud was names like Harvard and Stanford, much bigger than anything else. So we wanted to extract those terms to kind of dive a little bit deeper and get a sense of what people were talking about. And some of the words are, fairly, duh, like students, professor, study. But digging down a little bit further, we see medical, which clearly we understand that the medical fields and programs related to nursing and whatnot are, drastically on the rise from an application standpoint. Basketball we saw mentioned over 2,000 times, again, because most of the mentions there were related to March Madness. Accepted. This was the height of the college admission season, so we certainly expected to see the word accepted. That was kind of a tongue twister there. And moving on. Now we wanted to look at those key drivers of the college choice process. So looking for the term financial aid within the entire body of conversation, we found roughly 700 mentions. And we see some very informative posts here. I'm planning on applying to Northwestern University. They have great financial aid, especially for Illinois students. What about you? So a lot of kids asking questions, a lot of kids putting out opinions about the quality of financial aid packages or the necessity to get a financial aid package. Here's an interesting one, the second to last bullet. Does Hopkins give any merit scholarships? When do acceptees generally hear about financial aid? That, if I worked at Hopkins and saw a comment like that, I would probably immediately go check my website and make sure that the information of this nature related to merit scholarships and financial aid are prominently displayed. Maybe this particular person couldn't find it, but maybe a comment like this speaks to a problem of the findability of very important information. And the clusters that you see below are three-word phrases. So Duke University undergraduate was mentioned 25 times. Historic levels of the best financial aid levels of financial aid. Again, when we start to analyze clusters of words, we get much more perspective into the general themes and topics of conversation. Looking at academic reputation and strength of major, what's really interesting here is when we want to analyze specific topics, we have to experiment quite a bit with the search queries that we set up. So, for example, we're going to get to this in a little bit, but searching for the term campus safety only yielded one result. So what that probably means is that that prospects and other people weren't using that specific term. Maybe they were, talking about it, but just using different, terminology. So this social media monitoring is largely an iterative, very experimental process where we have to, one, understand the language of, who we're interested in finding out about. So if we want to find information about prospective students, we have to learn a little bit about how they talk and what kinds of words they use, and maybe there are regional differences in semantics, and you have to kind of experiment. Some things can be found very easily, but looking for academic reputation and strength of major, an 18 or 17-year-old kid most likely isn't going to use the word strength of major. So what we did instead was we searched for the terms major, program, and reputation individually, and then kind of cobbled the results together. So we see some really interesting posts. This first one, I really hope I can get a scholarship of the human resource management major at University of Michigan. Somebody advising another prospect not to be afraid to contact professors directly at some of these top-ranked institutions. This last bullet, hey, can anybody give some advice? My brother, got admitted to Wash U in St. Louis, Berkeley, Emory, and Chapel Hill, and wants to do applied math, probably double major in computer science. Which school should he choose? So not only do we get data that can help inform, again, competitor set, but we clearly see interest, and I would really want to track this thread and see what the response was, see what the perception is of who does, in fact, have the best applied math department according to these prospective students. Tuition and fees. This is a topical area that we didn't expect to see a ton of good news, and that's really not surprising given trends. But look at that first bullet. Stanford University tuition fees are $51,630 per year. That's equivalent to our $490,000. Tuition for 1 year at Columbia to study socio-medical economic sciences is $34,000 without fees. Jesus help me. We saw a lot of posts that clearly indicate that we are at a tipping point for price. And right now we're talking about elite institutions. This study focused on elite schools that we don't expect to see going anywhere. And the value proposition of these schools, even with astronomical tuition and fee levels, is still pretty high. But what about the regional universities that are lesser known and that are still $32,000 a year? Pretty soon the next report will be looking more at those types of schools, but we're really at an interesting point price-wise for higher education. Employment and job prospects. A lot of the research that we are currently doing with prospective students really suggests that a lot of kids are looking at college from a very utilitarian perspective. Not gone are the days, but farther and few between are the days where kids just go major in English because they feel like that'll be fun and that's what they want to do. This is very related to price. A lot of students and their parents feel that if they're going to make that kind of investment in higher education, they need to choose a course of study that's going to have some return. Engineering, sciences, medicine. So I think we're seeing quite a shift in why anybody is willing to make the investment in college. And clearly, the ability to get a job on the back end is a hugely important decision in choosing what school to attend. So here we see posts like Northwestern University School of Law decided to cut its class size by about 10%, citing a shakeout in the market for legal jobs. So we see some other interesting data here. We're talking that third bullet right in the middle, somebody's talking about University of Michigan and saying that basically Michigan can't compete with cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles in terms of nightlife and other things. a lot of very, very interesting data out there about job prospects, particularly as they relate to choosing specific courses of study. There was one post which I didn't include in here, but it was from a girl who was going to University of Michigan, and she said, I am taking a course in classical Greek mythology, which in no way relates to my ability to get a job upon graduation, exclamation mark, smiley face. So that type of attitude is becoming much more prominent, for better or for worse. Again, campus safety appeared only one time. That term, itself, there was definitely some other type of conversation. This study, data collection period, unfortunately occurred when that horrible event at the Boston Marathon took place, and so we did see a number of posts related to the Boston Marathon bombing, which you can see in those bullets below. Faculty prestige and excellence in teaching. To isolate those conversations, we searched for faculty, professor, teach, as well as teaching, teacher, teachers, teaches, and we found 1,465 mentions, many of which were quite complimentary. The second to last bullet there, somebody felt that Columbia and Harvard indoctrinate instead of teach. That's an interesting observation. And then we see, again, mostly good data about specific professors, but the rise of massive online open courses, again, we see that middle bullet. Courses provides free and open access to a selection of introductory courses taught by distinguished teachers and scholars at Yale University. The aim of the project is to expand access to educational materials for all who wish to ... And posts like that have really tremendous implications from the instructional side. These massive open online courses are really causing great waves in academia, and they will figure prominently in the college choice process going forward. Social life. Again, only 5 mentions of the term social life, but there were many other conversations taking place that used other terms. Here, the first bullet, I said with respect to academics and social life, cost isn't a matter. I'm fine with both locations. And then somebody asking in the second bullet, this student is asking for advice on whether to pick Emory or Carleton, asking for opinions. So we saw tons of questions posed in forums, on Facebook, on all of these channels. Prospective students are a huge resource for each other. And particularly on social media, where really everybody is potentially perceived as an authority, we have to be vigilant about identifying these conversations and addressing them, because brand perception is much more than what we put out there. It has to be in many ways a response to what people are saying. So if we as higher education marketers are finding people spouting out misperceptions about our schools, that's an opportunity for us to A, address them and set them straight, or B, counter with accurate information, different things. But just like Wikipedia can often be a questionable source of information in terms of its validity, and certainly other online channels which some students mistakenly feel are authoritative academic sources, these social media channels and the conversations that occupy them potentially create perceptions that may or may not be correct. And so it's very important to address these conversations and make sure that if people are misquoting facts and figures, that our marketing teams are there to address that. Internships, also a strong driver in the college choice process. Here we see some really interesting posts about international experiences in Bangladesh through Michigan. People really excited to start internships at Columbia University. Great way to connect alumni relations and social media outreach. At Stanford alumni hiring, at Stanford students for community manager internships. So, all kinds of connections, both within institutions and outside of institutions in terms of internships. So, where is the ROI in social media? Again, that's a question that so many institutions wrestle with, and that's because very often schools start their social media efforts with a focus on outbound communication. There's a football game or a homecoming, and they have 10 pictures, and the important question is, what picture of the game should I post? How should I frame this factoid in order to spur engagement and replies and retweets and shares and whatnot? And again, not to diminish the importance of outbound communication, but a lot of those strategies and a lot of the metrics associated with them aren't necessarily related to our marketing goals. So let's talk specifically about enrollment goals. What we do is, with several of the schools that we work with, we set up very granular queries where we might put in the school's institutional name plus the word accepted, plus the word applied, plus the terms thinking about, considering, might go, not sure about, all kinds of different combinations to try and identify people at various points in the funnel. And in many cases, where our institutions are engaged in search, where they might buy a list of names and then send out a bunch of emails and direct mail pieces, that is clearly a strategy that has a lot of value and should be in place. However, utilizing the monitoring of social media, we can often identify people who are not on those lists, who might be stealth applicants, who might be people who are in no way, shape, or form on our radar, who we can now pull into our funnel, and in some cases identify almost at the bottom of the funnel where they're just about ready to make an enrollment decision. So when we put in terms like institutional names and words like apply and accepted, look at some of these posts. Applying for Yale University and Harvard University. Wish me luck. We can identify by and large the vast majority of individuals who make these kind of posts. When we look at these posts, we can typically go to Facebook or Twitter or wherever they occur, and oftentimes these prospective students will use their full names. So as institutional marketers and admissions people, we can cross-reference those names against our prospect database and first determine, are they even on our radar? Two, if they are, do we need to craft a unique or specific engagement strategy for this person or this cohort of people? We also get a lot of rich data about institutional competitor sets. This bullet here, looking at Boston College, Boston University, Carnegie Mellon, George Washington, Lehigh, UMD, College Park. Over time, as we collect data, we want to be careful about jumping to sweeping conclusions when we look at one post. But collecting data over time and really analyzing it effectively, we can start to see trends where some of our commonly held notions of who our competitors are and what do people really think about us and our programs and our president and our faculty, are those really accurate based on the social data? When we look at words like application, clearly we're getting people who are maybe not in the funnel yet. When we see words and posts using the words accepted, we can expect that those people are in our funnel. But when I see a post like accepted to Wash U in St. Louis and Northwestern, if I am Wash U in St. Louis and I really want this kid, I am probably going to either pick up the phone, maybe send an email the next day. You have to be a little bit careful not to stalk people on social media, and there certainly is a fine line. I mean, if somebody posted this at 11:58, you wouldn't necessarily want to chime in at 11:59. Hi, I'm so and so from Wash U. That might freak the kid out, but we can put into place maybe more subtle strategies, an email the next day or a phone call. If we identify 5 or 10 people a week or a month at some of these schools, we might be able to convert a couple of those, and that is where the true ROI is from a recruiting perspective. From an ongoing research perspective, social media monitoring we recommend as a tool that should be part of your kit. Surveys and focus groups, these are all extremely powerful, commonly utilized tools for research, and they are tried and true. But very few people utilize social media in terms of its research power. I mean, these are authentic communications that are occurring in real time by people who are not participating in a research study, so they think. And because of that, they are not artificially modifying their behavior, because as we all know, a lot of people who do participate in structured focus groups and surveys sometimes respond in ways that they think we want to hear. So when we see data like this, it's real, and we have the opportunity to act on it. So that is really where we come from when we look at social media, one as a highly effective recruitment tool and the other as a highly effective research tool. And that all starts with listening first, and then responding and crafting our outbound communication strategies second. So with that, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to let people ask questions, and I am working on that right now. So let me just see. Let's see, somebody asked a question. Oh, no, somebody just responded. But if anybody has a question, please type it into the chat box, and I will respond accordingly. I just want to point out that on this final slide here, my contact information in the form of an email address is included, and I am more than happy to speak with any of you on an individual level to answer any questions, to dive a little bit deeper into the study or its implications. I certainly welcome feedback and would love to talk with any of you who are interested in this. So if there are no questions currently, feel free again to email me offline, and I will also be sending you a copy of this presentation so that you have my email address. And I look forward to hopefully speaking with any of you out there about this study. So I thank you very much, and hope that you have a great day and a great upcoming 4th of July and summer and all that good stuff. So thank you again. This has been James Weinberg from TWG Plus, and we appreciate your time and support. Thank you.